time now. The way we're going to structure our presentation is I'm going to tell my story about how I got into farming and agriculture, and then talk about how I met other farmers and worked cooperatively together. And then Martha's going to tell her story, which is a bit different, about how there wasn't the opportunity for cooperation. So it's kind of a foil for my story.
And what I learned from Robin. I'm Robin's academic supervisor, but she's my teacher when it comes to farming. So there we go.
Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're just going to talk about the feminization of agriculture. So you'll kind of see our stories and then see how this feminization of agriculture and sustainability has kind of fostered a new way to get into markets for women in specific. And then after that, we're going to talk about Canadian agricultural policy and the direction that it tries to push us, and how our research has found that people have actually succeeded by doing the exact opposite. So that's been interesting for us, very gratifying as farmers who've been forced into a model that we don't always agree with. Okay, so down here's my little farm, Feisty Field, and that's my market stand at the Moss Street Market. I got into farming kind of, not even quite sure how I knew what I wanted to do, but growing up my family had a big plot of land, and we used to grow a lot of our own food. We lived in the north of Canada, north central Canada, and there just wasn't very high quality produce, and so my parents were very into growing our own food, and that meant a lot to me. I didn't realize it at the time. I always felt like I was oppressed into slaving away from my family. I was very disappointed when we left home that they drastically reduced their food production. So that was obviously formative for me, and then I went to an agricultural university looking to farm, and that was in the mid-90s, right before the big sustainable agriculture movement. So there really wasn't anything for me at the University of Guelph, where I was. I dabbled in agriculture, and then I ended up graduating in English because I couldn't find anything that I wanted. I traveled to South America after graduating, and I found the model of what I wanted to do there. It was very, I saw families working together on the land, very small, cooperative communities that worked together. They all cooked together at lunchtime, and I just thought that that is how I wanted to live, but I didn't know how to bring that home. And when I came back to Canada, I went to a conference at Guelph, and I met my mentor farmer, Tina Fraser, who I followed her immediately back to her farm and decided that I wanted to apprentice with her. So I did the apprenticeship, and after I finished working a season with Tina, she helped me find land through an organization that she helped found called Linking Land and Future Farmers. So there I was, a newly apprenticed farmer, no assets to speak of, a backpack on my back, a song in my heart, but that's about it. And she helped me set up on land. So I started a farm where I currently am now, 12 years later, farming an acre. And she had a business with a friend of hers called Sanet Organics. And I was a contractor to this business. So I automatically, I learned my trade, I got a market, and I got land, all through the same and that's an important theme in this presentation on how these women set up the system. After I got the land, I participated in an entrepreneurship program for young entrepreneurs in agri-food. So I was able to get a weekly stipend while I set up my business. So that helped me go. And then I started, as I got more volume, I could contract to Sanet Organics in a with more volume. So it kind of, my progress was all very well staggered, and the steps were put into place as I went along. That's some of the women with Sanet Organics. And so I'm just going to go on to talk about how I got involved with Sanet Organics. So Sanet Organics was originally a business run by two women, Tina Fraser and Rebecca Jean, and they had this vision of doing a CSA model, community-supported agriculture, which is people who buy subscriptions into your farm so they get a share of the harvest each year. And so they had a business where they had 20 shares that people would buy into their farm. And they hired on myself and my friend Rachel and my friend Heather, who will show up. This is Heather at the back, and Rachel's in there somewhere. We're planting our big greenhouse. So that we were all contractors to Sanesh Organics, just growing very small amounts. And then we would have been happily ever after, working for Tina and Rebecca, except they burned out and decided they didn't want to do it anymore. And we thought, what will we do? We don't want to sell on the world market. We want our sheltered market. So we decided to buy Sanesh Organics from them, which is a big step because we could see how much work they did. And we didn't necessarily want to do all that work, but we decided, heck, we'll just work together. And it ended up as a fluke. As I was studying our co-op model for the BC Institute of Cooperative Studies, I realized that our 3 personality types are there's 4 personality types, I guess under a certain model, but we happen to be 3 of the 4 that are essential for working together. And our decision-making process is very organic, as you could say. Just to give you an example how it works, I am the ideas generator. So I go off to conferences, I can't wait to get out of town, find out new ideas, and I bring them back to Rachel. And I say, okay, we're gonna buy a big greenhouse and we're gonna put in our money and we're gonna go with it. And Rachel will sit back and say, maybe we could, what if we could do a smaller greenhouse? What if we do something different? And Rachel's very analytic, and she's a very good business, she has a mind for business and sensible decisions. So I know if I can sell Rachel on it, then we're 2 out of 3. Then we go to Heather, who is, forget what her official title is in this schematic for personality types, but Heather can say, okay, we're gonna do it, this is how we have to do it. You do this, you do that. And I'm always happy to say, okay, let's do it. What do I have to do? So we work really well together, and we were lucky to find each other in this in our small community. And I think that's probably all I have to say about Sanesh Organics. Just by working together, we could change the way we farmed. We all of a sudden we could bid on bigger contracts with restaurants and grocery stores. We could count on a regular supply, and if I didn't have something, well, maybe Heather and Rachel will have it. And I had the confidence that if I got sick, I knew that they would cover for me. There's all sorts of great advantages that we found working together. And now on to Martha's story. Look at that little cutie.
Those are my sheep. These are the triplets. They were born this spring. My sheep are wool sheep. I'm a full-time faculty member of the Department of Sociology, but I also have a small farm on Pender Island, and I farm part-time. I grew up immersed in farm politics. My Uncle John was the president of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association. You will now guess I grew up in Ireland. Okay. Till the day he died. He had been very involved in setting up cooperative creameries in the province where I grew up. One of those cooperative creameries morphed into something that became known as Golden Vale. It used to be a farmer's own cooperative creamery, and gradually it became something that was kind of morphed into something that was more conventionally business. And now some of you might see the modern version of, the modern incarnation of local milk in Kerrygold Products. It's a big multinational corporation, it's huge. It exploits the farmers who provide the milk. But it started off as a local cooperative creamery, and my Uncle John started it up in the region where I came from. So I've always been interested in farming, and I grew up, a lot of my childhood was on a farm. When I came to Canada and moved to BC, I got the chance to go back to farming. I had farmed full-time in Ireland for about 5 or 6 years on the family farm. And so I got into sheep because I have a full-time job. My sheep are the most beautiful sheep in the world, let there be no doubt about it. Their wool is magnificent. But farming on Pender Island is depressed and dismal. It wasn't always like that. Farming on the Gulf Islands was like world leading, Canadian leading at the turn of the last century. It had the best Jersey cows in Canada. They sold Jersey cows to the UBC farm, and they used to win all the prizes. They used to cut several cuts of hay on the farm across the road from me. Now you can't get one cut of hay off it. There are no cows. There are a few beef cows in Jersey on Pender. Nobody milks cows, and the farmers are depressed. And I wonder, where are we going wrong? And it's from this that from Robin I learn a lot. We haven't worked cooperatively, and we have not feminized farming. We're still working with a kind of productivist notion of agriculture. Now, you can't win. In a global food economy, the farmer can't win. So if we're going to survive as farmers on Pender, we can't win straight on, so we have to sidestep the global economy. And that's why what Robin's doing is so interesting to me. It gives an opportunity for farmers to actually to farm well and to survive economically. But we're not doing it on Pender Island, I can tell you, so I need to learn from her. And we need to cooperate. We need to be, we cannot produce a global commodity and survive. We can't do it. So you're not producing a global commodity. You're producing local food, but you're producing more than local food. And so I wonder then if we could now go into what it is that you're doing differently. Because we kind of listened to agricultural advice for years, and we did the right things. We tried to become more efficient. You keep more animals. You know, you scale up. You invest some money. It isn't working. Could you now talk about what you've learned from your research about how, in a sense, you're doing the opposite to the agricultural advice, and maybe we take it from there?
Yeah, when we were talking about just co-ops and whether they do well or not, one interesting point of Saanich Organics that people don't always get is Saanich Organics doesn't make money. It helps our farms make money. Saanich Organics is our broker face. It's us, but we're dealing with, our administrator is dealing with restaurants and grocery stores and selling to commercial contracts. But what we're doing is keeping our price up under our name, Saanich Organics. We can get more under our name, Saanich Organics, that we can through our small farms. So as a co-op model, Saanich Organics isn't that financially successful. It's our farms that are very successful. So that's an interesting point about the co-ops. Yeah, but it's in terms of making decisions, and it functions really well otherwise, but it's not a money maker. Just before we go into the agricultural policy and doing the different things, what we found is this, especially organic agriculture, is a feminization of agriculture. And we have this junk at Saanich Organics about how we have all these wonderful strong women in agriculture, and then we think, wait, maybe there's too many strong women in the same room. But Martha was saying earlier on, they miss having we have this woman who, she's just like a battering ram. She does not take no for an answer. She puts farmers first. At the farmers market, she calls the shots. Farmers are right front and center. The crafters are off to the side, even though we're outnumbered 4-1. There's definitely a room for women leaders in organic agriculture.
There's room for biotechnology if we could clone her.
Yeah, that's right. We should put Monsanto to good work.
Sorry.
Yeah. So when the organic market emerged, it was kind of this opportunity for women to move in, and that's what happened in Victoria. We really, all our forefathers, they really they moved in and created space, and so it was values-focused marketing that they could do. They set up the Moss Street Market as a market that was different than other markets because everything was sustainably produced. the people that were selling the produce were there, actually made the produce, grew the produce or made the crop. So that was, it put everybody on the same playing field. We had, they're not doing price fixing, but there's a market analysis.
No dumping.
Yeah, no dumping. So all the prices reflect the cost of production, which is very different than the world market and very necessary if you're going to have successful agriculture. So they, Mary Alice and Tina really brought that home, that prices had to reflect the cost of production or we weren't going to get any more farmers coming up through the ranks. And because they did that, there was room for Heather, Rachel, and myself. Yeah, diversity versus monoculture. So we have these farms that can feed our families as well as feed the market. When you're stuck in a monoculture system, the farmers can't feed themselves. They have to, all of a sudden they're forced into a cash economy for everything, whereas we're very sustainable in our homes. We feel we eat like kings because we have such great food to eat, and then we have money at the market. Yeah, and a nurturing model, nurturing community first, feeding ourselves, feeding our neighbors, really building strong communities. That's a real focus. Reliance on each other. Tina and Mary Alice and a few other women really set up information sharing groups in the community, and that was huge because in conventional agriculture there's a lot of reliance on outside experts. You get a consultant, they come and tell you what to do on your farm, and they know, so you should do it even though you don't see the results because they're from the outside. Decentralization, so having lots of small little farms rather than huge farming areas, and quality of life above all. Yeah, so these are paradoxes that we came up with. So when farmers were, when we asked farmers to define, to tell us if they were successful, if they were happy with their income and their quality of life, that's what we decided is an indicator of success. And it looked different for for different people, and it's hard to tell with the bottom line of a farm whether or not they're successful because there's a lot of things going on under the surface with tax assessments, with off-farm income, with genuine, like with what Martha's doing, genuine service to humanity of saving rare breeds. It's not necessarily economically viable, but it's just so important. And people keep going even though it runs at a loss because they just know it's essential work.
Yeah, my sheep are rare breed sheep. They were almost extinct. I myself and a couple of others have moved them off the almost extinct list.
Yeah, and that's an untold value. Paradox of scale. If you read any agricultural policy documents, they tell you bigger is better. Go big. We must become efficient to compete on the world market. And it's just not true. As farms get bigger and bigger, the profits per acre are smaller and smaller. The more farmers are forced into debt. It's not a given that bigger is better. And we've found some small farms on the Sandwich Peninsula that are 1 acre or less and are grossing $60,000 an acre. And that's amazing compared to some farms in Saskatchewan that are making 20 cents an acre. Yeah, and as small farms can be more flexible. They don't have to have so much investment in specialized equipment. They can switch gears on a dime to take advantage of niche markets. Paradox of diversity. The standard rule of thumb with Canadian agricultural policy is find a commodity that you do best with, that you can compete in, and just pare down, simplify, buy specialized equipment. And we were just up island listening to a farmer speak, Joel Salatin, who was very entertaining, but one of his take-home messages was don't buy equipment that has a single use. Make sure everything you buy on your farm can be used 4 or 5 different places. Have a tractor that the bucket will come off so you can use it in your logging operation in the field. Really make sure there's all sorts of different uses for everything you buy, and just be as diverse so you can capture as many markets as possible. Paradox of investment. In my graduate work, we found that the farms that had invested the most were the least resilient, which is scary, and they were the ones that were most likely to go out of business in the next 5 years. It was the farmers that had invested little bits at a time, really tested the market, found that it worked. Next year, okay, we'll put in another greenhouse. Next year, we'll do this, do that. Reinvesting the profits in the land, taking the most of the money home for their families to increase their quality of life, to do whatever that families do with their money, but don't get a big loan and invest it in your land, because you're guaranteed to stress yourself out and not be able to recapture your cost of production. Paradox of education. I don't know if it's the same in Japan, but there has been a stereotype of farmers as just, as dumb as you can get. If you can't do anything else, well, maybe you can farm. And what we found with the farmers, if most had post-secondary education, but even the ones that didn't, you could just tell that they were so well versed, so skilled, so they just had a lot of knowledge. We just had an incident at the farm the other day where a cement truck got stuck. We were pouring a cement slab, and the driver couldn't get out, and we were calling a tow truck, and all of a sudden his boss came up the driveway and he said, it's the king of farmers, we're gonna get out of here in no time. I loved it, because it showed that, just the respect for farmers. If there's a king of farmers here, we can do anything, we're set. So that was kind of, it's the paradox, is that the farmers are really the ones at the cutting edge in a lot of cases. Paradox of rural revitalization. One of a big problem in Canada is migration to the cities, and people going to the cities for quality of life, more income opportunities, more everything. Well, it's turning out that vibrant organic farms in rural outlying areas are actually attracting people away from the cities for quality of life. It's not always what the farmers want, but we're and it's actually providing a lot of good markets for farmers too. So it does drive up the land price, but then you have customers right around you that are willing to pay a high price.
Just one more thing about efficiency. I read someplace that in 1940 it took 1 calorie of energy, we'll say diesel, to produce 2.3 calories of food. Today it takes 10 calories of energy to produce 1 calorie of food. So in that term, farmers 60 years ago were 23 times more efficient just in terms of energy use. It's something around those figures anyway, something enormous like that.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to say is that I love the good news story that Robin has, but I'm always torn between what I also know to be the very dismal conditions that many farmers face. So there's really good news stories, but there's also bad news stories, and it's trying to understand how to link those. I find that a constant kind of challenge. But certainly we on Pender Island can learn a lot from your cooperative model.
Just to go along with that, there's been work done by Amartya Sen, and it's been built on. He did this work in 1952, I think, about how there's an inverse relationship between farm size and productivity. So the smaller the farm, the more productive it is, which is just counterintuitive. But in my thesis, I've been finding more and more citations of people who are testing that model, and they can't quite figure out why it is, and nobody can know for sure. And some economists were guessing that it was because you could exploit family labor on a small farm, and that's why. But it's not true. They tested that hypothesis. It's just attention to detail, I think. Anyway, we find that out.
Well, economies of scale may or may not be relevant to agriculture, right? I mean, the idea of economies of scale is, there's a philosophy behind that may be true for heavy industry or for mercantilism or other historical circumstances, but that model doesn't necessarily work for healthcare. It may not work for agriculture. There are other industries where it's not relevant, so it could be related to that.
No, that's good. Everyone should jump in if there's something to say. Yeah, and paradox of success. The highest earning farms, or the farms that look best on paper, aren't necessarily the most successful farms, and you can really tell that by talking to people. A lot of the women that we interviewed that were farming, they had a lower income than the men that were farming, but a lot of them were raising children. They were doing things that were very, very meaningful, and they had this opportunity through sustainable agriculture to realize their dreams and to have good food and some ways to extract value from life that they weren't in other circumstances. So we can't always look at the paper to see the true story.
Mm-hmm. And clearly the conventional business model of farming isn't work. If you look at rising farm debt, declining number of farmers, and so on, so there has to be alternative models.
Yeah. In our case, as women farmers, we found that by working together, we could increase our quality of life because we weren't all driving to town. We would often, before we were working together, we would pass each other on the highway and have a half-full truck of produce that we were bringing here and there. And so as soon as we started working together, our quality of life went up. We're lucky because there's just 3 of us, so we don't have the painful board meetings. We can't wait to get together. It's, there's this wisdom of don't go into business with your best friends, but we can't imagine not being best friends because we see each other so much that it's just a great thing. It's a lot of fun to work together. Being interdependent adds a new dimension to our friendship and to our businesses as well. We're way more sustainable than we ever would be before. We can pool our money together to do bigger projects that are fun, and I can't imagine doing it any other way.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah.
I want my sheet packet.
Questions? Any questions? Maybe we should, Linda?
When you go beyond your very, very local group, are you involved in farm organizations or farmer organizations at a higher level that could have policy impact, could have beyond the micro community, and where are women there at that level?
Yeah, there's a lot of farmer organizations. I'm on 5 boards of directors of farm-related nonprofits. It's you can't be a farmer and not be an activist. It's impossible because you've learned too much about the food system, and it's so enraging that you have to work towards policy reform. There's provincial bodies of certified organic growers, the Certified Organic Association of BC, and we're always running into policy situations, food safety kind of things that are counter to farmer intuition, and it's very, very interesting. It's always, there's always fire at our meetings. It's somebody's stirred up about something and it's bound to make change.
And we're both members of National Farmers Union, that's a member of Via Campesina, which is a global movement of peasant and small farmers that's very active globally, politically.
Yeah, just relating to Christian's comment earlier, based on what you have seen, I mean, it's a fascinating model to me, but by your contact with the overall agricultural community, do you think the small-scale farming would apply to any type of crops, or are they actually more efficient in certain type of crops? And I just wanted to have kind of
It's a good question. I can't see why it wouldn't be more effective. I hear about small-scale wheat growing, where they have wheat CSAs. There's one on the mainland, so they're growing grains cooperatively and then selling them to directly to families. So that's, we always think of wheat farming as necessarily extensive, necessarily industrial. Some people are proving it's different. I don't know how viable that is.
No, I'm just paralleling it to like the manufacturing sector, for example.
Oh, I
I mean,
see.
like when you have a movement from mass production to customization, I mean, it does not necessarily work for
Yeah.
every
All
single product,
sector,
but
I see.
in a sense would apply to specific products. And
Yeah.
just kind of.
And I guess maybe,
Yeah, and I really don't know, somebody else would have to answer that, what works for me. But as against that, you have a whole lot of global institutional changes that make it very hard for small-scale farming to happen. A whole lot of harmonisation of standards, food safety, all sorts of things that are in the name of protecting consumers, but actually eliminating the opportunities for small-scale farming like that. So, you know, and that's at that kind of institutional level, nationally and internationally.
Mhm.
And I imagine that that's something that a lot of small-scale production might find is happening too. You might see parallels with small-scale agriculture and other small-scale. I know they're having the health food industry is having some of those kinds of issues, but I don't know enough to answer it.
one interesting trend that's happening, I don't know if it's
Yeah.
because of food, but it's the farmers markets that are springing up everywhere. They're kind of exponentially growing, and with those farmers markets, there's opportunities for crafters. And one thing we're trying to do at our farmers market is really encourage lots of I'm always into very useful crafts. We want soap, we want linens, we want all sorts of things that people use every day at our farmers market. And I think there's tons of opportunities for people to work together to make those products and then sell them directly to the customer. Yeah.
One more.
One more.
And one more.
You use this very interesting expression of feminization of agriculture, and I was curious whether or not you would feel comfortable with the expression re-feminization of agriculture, because it has a kind of a historical, I mean, there's a historical, I'm not sure if there's a historical connection to that kind of a thing. The defeminization of agriculture, perhaps,
Yes.
has something to do with the rise of industrial agriculture.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about, I mean, would you say that there's some sort of historical connection there that may be worth examining?
Yeah, I'm just thinking everywhere else in the world except North America, farms are women run. If you go to India, if you go anywhere in Asia, the women are the farmers. And I think, I don't know,
As an African American in an African American community, like what you're talking about is
sure.
what my grandmother did.
Yeah.
With, and I mean, cooperative support is not such a formal structure. So it seems familiar to me, but
Yeah.
forgotten, which is something that, of course,
Yeah.
is in my research. It's like,
That's a good
this is new.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
I'm
point.
curious.
Thank you. Really interesting.